Hello, dear dreamers. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the day melt away. Tonight, we step into a kingdom wrapped in golden mist, where whispers of mystery linger on the wind. Our story follows Prince Alaric, drawn by the pull of the unknown to the fabled Forbidden Island, a place of secrets and shadows, where truths lie hidden beneath the veil of legend. Let the soothing rhythm of my voice guide you as we unravel a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the price of forbidden knowledge. Relax, breathe deeply, and let this story lead you gently into the embrace of sleep. In a kingdom veiled beneath golden fog and suspended in the murmur of legends, Prince Alaric wandered the shadowed corridors of his father's castle, his heart aching with the weight of an unspoken yearning. He had heard tales of the Forbidden Island since childhood, a land spoken of in hurried whispers, full of mystery and magic, lying shrouded beyond the grey waters of the eastern sea. Even in the sunniest daylight, the island remained covered in an eerie mist, drifting like a waking dream in the distance, calling to the brave and the foolish alike. The Forbidden Island, his tutors had warned, was cursed. Even its name was scarcely spoken, for fear that mere mention would stir whatever restless spirits lay buried there. They said the island was alive, breathing with secrets, guarding truths so potent they could alter the fate of kingdoms. Only those foolhardy enough to crave power beyond comprehension would set foot upon its shores, and none who had ventured there had ever returned. These words, meant to chill, had done quite the opposite for Alaric. His imagination grew wild with the thought of what could lie beyond those mists. And soon he found that the quiet and familiarity of his kingdom stifled him. It was not fear that kept him awake at night, but a fierce desire, a desire to uncover the forbidden. As a child, he had begged his father for stories of the place, but the king would only shake his head, offering nothing but a grave warning. The island is cursed, Alaric. Even thinking of it can darken a soul. But Alaric, now a young man, found that his curiosity gnawed at him like an insatiable hunger. Every legend, every forbidden whisper seemed to pull at him, weaving a song that only he could hear. The island, silent and spectral across the waves, beckoned him in dreams and in the quiet hours before dawn. One night, when the moon was hidden by clouds and the world lay silent, he felt the pull more fiercely than ever before. He found himself standing by his window, gazing out into the darkness that blanketed the sea. And he knew this was the night he would go. He could wait no longer. A quiet resolve settled in him as he slipped through the castle's darkened corridors, cloaked in shadow, moving with a practiced silence. He had prepared for this moment in secret, hoarding maps, studying tides, and memorizing the tales that hinted at a hidden path across the waters. In the stable, his horse snorted quietly, as if sensing the strange intensity of the moment. Alaric stroked its mane and whispered for silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The island was forbidden, yes, but there were stories of those who had seen it, of secret trails through the sea where the water fell silent and still, almost as if it held its breath, waiting. He saddled his horse, pausing only to leave a single note behind, a cryptic message that would mean nothing to anyone except those who understood the longing for the unknown. With his path set, he rode quietly from the castle, disappearing into the night like a ghost. The journey to the sea was uneventful, yet each step felt imbued with a strange energy, as if the island's very spirit had reached out to meet him. The wind was calm, too calm, and the night grew colder the closer he came to the water's edge. When he finally arrived, he was greeted not by crashing waves, but by a stillness so complete it felt otherworldly. The sea lay before him, a mirror in the dark, reflecting only a faint glimmer from the few stars that pierced the cloud cover. The island, hidden by mist, loomed in the distance, an ominous shadow wrapped in mystery. Here, in the moon's absence, with only the faintest glimmer to guide him, Alaric hesitated for a heartbeat. He thought of his father's words, the warnings, the legends, yet a pulse deep within him urged him on, pushing him beyond his own fears. There was no turning back now. Slowly, he scanned the rocky shore and spotted the path he had read about, concealed among the jagged stones. A narrow strip, nearly invisible, led into the sea, winding toward the island with a deliberate grace that seemed almost unnatural. Alaric steeled himself, feeling the weight of the moment, the darkness clinging to him like a cloak. He took his first step onto the path, then another and another, the shore fading behind him as he moved forward. The silence pressed in as he walked, each step echoing in the stillness. The mist thickened, enveloping him, turning the world into a strange, shadowy place where sound and sight seemed to play tricks. Alaric's heartbeat quickened, each thud a reminder of the life he left behind, a world that now felt far away. Step by step, he moved deeper into the unknown, and as the island loomed closer, its shape took form, an ancient silhouette shrouded in secrets and shadows. In the distance, he thought he heard whispers, faint and indistinct, as if the island itself was murmuring, welcoming him, or perhaps warning him. A shiver ran through him, but he pressed on, driven by the forbidden desire that had led him this far. And so, Prince Alaric crossed the hidden path, slipping silently into the veil of mist, and leaving behind everything he had known. The forbidden island awaited, cloaked in darkness, ready to reveal its mysteries to the one who dared to listen. Alaric's steps grew cautious as the mist thickened around him, curling and twisting like pale tendrils, shifting with a life of their own. The narrow path beneath his feet was slippery with seawater, and he moved slowly, feeling his way as each step carried him further from the safety of his kingdom and deeper into the waiting shadows of the forbidden island. The air itself felt heavy, pressing upon him with an almost sentient weight, and an eerie silence followed, broken only by the distant hiss of waves and the occasional whisper of wind that sounded almost like a voice. He moved forward, his gaze fixed ahead, though his heart drummed with the instinctive warning to turn back. The land around him was quiet, like a held breath, and the world seemed to close in, narrowing to just him, the path, and the impenetrable mist that obscured his destination. Only the faintest glimmer of the moon, pale and ghostly, guided his way, and even that light seemed to wane, swallowed by the gathering shadows. As he pressed on, Alaric began to see strange shapes along the edges of the path. Boulders, covered in thick moss, appeared at odd intervals, seeming almost like ancient sentinels guarding the way. The closer he got, the more they seemed to resemble faces, frozen in twisted expressions of sorrow or fear. They watched him, their stony features half hidden in the mist, but he dared not linger, feeling as if they might somehow come alive at any moment. He averted his gaze and quickened his pace, his breath shallow and uneven. Suddenly, the mist thinned, revealing a sliver of the island's shore just within reach. Alaric felt a strange sense of relief, tinged with dread, as he stepped onto the soft, damp sand. The ground felt different here, ancient and undisturbed, carrying a sense of foreboding that settled into his bones. He was truly on the forbidden island now, a place only spoken of in cautionary tales and warnings. And yet, it felt like the island had been waiting for him. Ahead, dark trees loomed like spectral guardians, their branches gnarled and twisted into unnatural shapes. They stretched high, blotting out what little light remained, their bark as black as shadows. Alaric took a step forward, feeling the pull of the island's mysteries drawing him deeper into its heart. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the island was testing his resolve, urging him to turn back even as it beckoned him further. As he ventured into the dense forest, the silence grew profound, unsettling. There was no rustle of animals, no chirping of insects, only the sound of his own footsteps breaking the stillness. Yet, as he moved further in, he began to feel a presence, a subtle awareness, as though unseen eyes were watching his every move. The air grew colder, prickling his skin and fogging his breath. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision, darting just beyond his sight. But when he turned to look, they dissolved, slipping away like smoke. The path before him twisted, winding through the dense undergrowth and leading to a strange clearing, where ancient stone pillars rose from the ground like skeletal remains of a forgotten temple. Their surfaces were covered in intricate carvings, symbols and faces twisted in eternal expressions of pain, horror, and reverence. Alaric could not look away. The stones seemed to pulse faintly, as if imbued with a dark energy, and the air around the pillars was thick with an invisible tension, charged and alive. He approached the nearest pillar, his hand drawn to it, almost against his will. The surface was cold to the touch, colder than stone should be, and as his fingers traced the carvings, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of understanding, as if the symbols whispered a hidden truth directly to his mind. But the whispers grew louder, overlapping, until they became a torrent of incomprehensible voices, filling his head with fragments of knowledge, flashes of strange places and times. Alaric stumbled back, tearing his hand from the pillar, breathing hard as the voices faded, leaving him shaken and unsteady. He glanced around the clearing, feeling as if he were no longer alone. The forest seemed to close in, the trees watching, listening, waiting. He began to feel the weight of his choice, the enormity of his trespass. The island was no mere place. It was a presence, ancient and aware. And he was a trespasser on sacred ground. And yet, he felt no desire to flee. The island's call, dark and seductive, was stronger than ever, urging him forward, deeper into its secrets. The mist shifted, forming strange shapes that flitted between the trees, but he could not look away. There was something waiting for him at the heart of this place, something that had lain buried for centuries. He knew, deep in his soul, that he could not leave without uncovering it, whatever the cost. With a final glance at the pillars, Alaric turned and continued along the winding path, his heart a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The island loomed around him, a labyrinth of shadow and silence, and as he moved deeper, he felt himself crossing an invisible threshold. There would be no turning back now. He was bound to the island, and it, in turn, had claimed him. In the distance, faint and almost indistinct, he thought he heard his name whispered on the wind. The island was calling, and Alaric, entranced and heedless of the warnings, pressed forward, deeper into the unknown. The forest closed in around him, dark and impenetrable, as Alaric ventured further into the island's shadowed heart. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the very ground were testing his will, binding his feet to the soil and measuring the strength of his resolve. The island seemed to breathe, exhaling a silence so profound that Alaric could hear his own heartbeat, a solitary drumbeat echoing in the empty air. He could feel the island's awareness settling upon him, wrapping him in an invisible embrace, and he sensed that something awaited him, hidden just beyond the mist. The path twisted and wound like a serpent, leading him deeper into the ancient wood. Strange flora bloomed in the shadows, their petals deep shades of violet and indigo, emitting a scent so intoxicating that it clouded his thoughts. The trees leaned over him, their branches forming dark arches, as if guiding him towards some unseen destination. Shadows played at the edges of his vision, and the deeper he went, the more he began to feel that he was not alone. Then he heard it. A faint whisper turned, distant and indistinct, like a voice carried by the wind. He froze, straining to listen. The sound wove through the trees, an almost musical murmur, calling him forward. The whispers grew louder, blending together, becoming a soft chorus that wrapped around him, tugging at his senses, urging him to continue. They were not hostile, but neither were they welcoming. They were simply curious, like spirits reaching out to touch something foreign. As he followed the voices, they guided him to a clearing bathed in a strange silvery light that seemed to come from nowhere. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone archway, covered in vines and ancient runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. The archway was old, older than any kingdom, any memory, older than the land itself, as if it had always been there, waiting in silence. Alaric felt a pull toward it, an almost magnetic urge to cross its threshold. But as he drew closer, he felt a presence, a figure watching him from the shadows beyond the archway. He stopped, his breath catching as the figure stepped forward, emerging from the mist like a spectre. Cloaked in robes of midnight, with eyes that glowed like burning embers, the being was neither human nor entirely spirit. It was the guardian of the Isles. The guardian's eyes fixed upon him, piercing and unfathomable, holding a depth of ancient knowledge and timeless sorrow. Alaric felt the weight of that gaze, a weight that seemed to see through him, past the flesh and into his very soul. It was as if every thought, every secret, every fear was laid bare under that gaze, and he felt small, insignificant, as if he were a child in the presence of something far beyond his understanding. "Prince Alaric," the guardian spoke, his voice like the rustle of leaves on a winter's night, soft yet carrying the force of ages. "You have come seeking knowledge that is not meant for mortal minds." Alaric's voice trembled as he replied, though he tried to keep his courage. "I have come to see what lies hidden here, to know the truth of the forbidden island." The guardian's expression did not change, but a shadow passed over his eyes, something that might have been sorrow or pity. "Truth is a gift that comes with a price. Are you prepared to bear it?" Alaric swallowed, his pulse racing as he met the Guardian's gaze. "I am." The Guardian extended a hand, his fingers pale and slender, like carved bone. "Then come. But understand this, Prince Alaric. Knowledge cannot be unlearned. Once the truth is seen, it will remain with you, altering the course of your life. To understand this island, you must be willing to sacrifice something of equal value." Alaric's curiosity burned brighter than his fear, and he stepped forward, feeling the weight of his decision settle upon him. He took the Guardian's hand, and a chill shot through him, as if his very blood had turned to ice. The world around him faded, and in an instant he was swept into a vision, a whirlwind of images, voices, and memories, spinning faster than he could grasp. He saw visions of ancient rulers, their faces half hidden in shadow, presiding over kingdoms lost to time. He glimpsed the rise and fall of civilizations, their triumphs and tragedies woven together in a tapestry of light and darkness. Strange landscapes unfolded before him, valleys drenched in perpetual twilight, mountains carved from crystal, oceans that gleamed with silver waves. He saw faces, countless faces, filled with hope, despair, and wisdom, all staring back at him with a knowing he could barely comprehend. But the visions grew darker, deeper, revealing secrets buried within the island itself. He saw the binding of spirits, the forging of pacts between worlds, and a power that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the earth. He saw a great darkness lurking in the island's core, a force older than memory, and he understood that the island was not simply a place. It was a prison, holding something that was never meant to be freed. The visions faded, leaving him gasping, his mind reeling from the weight of what he had seen. The Guardian released his hand, and Alaric staggered back, feeling as though a part of him had been stripped away. He understood now. He had crossed a threshold, glimpsed a forbidden wisdom, and he could never return to the innocence he once held. The Guardian looked at him, a glint of sorrow in his ageless eyes. "You have seen the truth of this island. Now you must decide. Will you leave with this knowledge, knowing the price it demands? Or will you remain and surrender what you hold most dear?" Alaric's heart pounded, his mind a tumult of wonder and fear. He felt both enlightened and burdened, as if a shadow had settled within him, forever altering his spirit. He looked at the Guardian, realizing the weight of his choice, knowing that whatever path he took, he would never be the same. And so, bound by truth and haunted by the secrets he had uncovered, Alaric stood in silence, at the edge of a decision that would shape the rest of his life. The island held its breath as Alaric pondered his decision, the weight of the Guardian's words pressing on him like an invisible hand. The ancient figure stood silent before him, the mist swirling around his form, his eyes gleaming with an ethereal light that seemed to pierce through the fog and into Alaric's very soul. Time itself felt suspended, the world shrinking to the two of them, alone in this sacred clearing, under the watchful, silent gaze of the ancient stones. Whatever knowledge you carry, the guardian spoke at last, his voice a whisper that resonated with the hum of the earth. You must understand that it will change you. Truth is a river that carves its own path, altering everything it touches. Knowledge, especially forbidden knowledge, demands a price. Alaric's mind was still reeling from the visions he had seen, the rise and fall of civilizations, the mysterious forces that pulsed within the island, and the dark presence slumbering in its depths. He felt as though he carried the weight of an entire world on his shoulders, as though he had aged a lifetime in mere moments. He looked at the guardian, searching his ancient, unreadable face for answers, for some glimmer of guidance. "What price must I pay?" he asked, his voice barely a murmur. He felt the words rather than spoke them, as if they came from a part of him that existed beyond speech, beyond thought. The guardian's gaze deepened, filling with a somber graffiti. The island's secrets are not easily carried. To hold them, you must offer something of equal weight. Either a cherished memory, a part of your soul, or a loved one's face in your mind. He paused, the silence pressing in. "The choice is yours, Prince. But know, Bun, that once you choose, there is no returning to what you were." Alaric's chest tightened, his heart caught between the fear of loss and the burning need to understand what he had uncovered. The visions replayed in his mind, the ancient kings, the twilight valleys, the surge of knowledge that had coursed through him like a flame. It was as if he had glimpsed the vastness of existence itself, an understanding that would haunt him, change him. And yet he was drawn to it, like a moth to fire. "What if I choose to leave?" he asked, his voice filled with both defiance and desperation. "What if I walk away and keep my soul whole?" The guardian's expression softened, almost as though he pitied the young prince. "You may walk away, Seeker," he replied, "but the knowledge you have glimpsed will follow you. It will haunt your dreams, pull at your heart, and consume your thoughts until you are drawn back here to face this choice again." He looked away, his gaze drifting to the shadows beyond the clearing. The island's secrets are not easily forsaken. They cling to those who seek them, binding them to the island's will. Alaric felt a chill creep over him, a bone-deep shiver that even the island's mist could not induce. He realized that his choice was not simply about leaving or staying. It was a choice between who he was and who he would become. He had stepped beyond the boundaries of the ordinary world, glimpsed the forbidden realm of mysteries older than time, and he knew there would be no peace for him if he tried to return to his former life. With a slow breath, he made his decision. "I accept the price," he said, his voice steady yet laced with sorrow. "Take a memory, one dear to me, so that I may carry the island's truth without losing myself entirely." The guardian nodded, his eyes reflecting something like approval, though tinged with the sadness of knowing what was about to be lost. "Very well, Alaric. Close your eyes and let the memory come to the surface." Alaric closed his eyes, feeling the darkness settle around him, the world slipping away as he allowed his mind to drift through his memories. He felt the warmth of sunlight, the familiar scent of his kingdom's gardens, and the sound of laughter, his mother's laughter, echoing softly in his mind. Her face appeared before him, a vision of kindness and love. The memory sharp and vivid, the warmth of her embrace, so real it brought tears to his eyes. Then, like a mist swept away by a strong wind, the memory faded, slipping from his grasp. He felt it leave him, a hollow ache filling the space it once held. When he opened his eyes, a sense of loss settled over him, quiet and profound. Yet somehow, he felt lighter. The island's knowledge, the burden of its ancient truths, now felt like something he could carry. The guardian watched him, silent and solemn. "It is done," he murmured. "The memory has been taken, and in its place, the island's secrets will reside within you, for as long as you draw breath." Alaric nodded, his gaze drifting to the ancient trees around them, feeling a strange connection to the island now, as though a part of him was woven into its very soil. The knowledge pulsed within him, not as a weight, but as a presence, a new awareness that would forever change how he saw the world. The island's truth had marked him, shaped him, and he knew that he was bound to it in a way that words could not express. As he turned to leave the clearing, the guardian's voice echoed softly behind him. "Remember, Alaric, wisdom carries its own burdens. Seek not to change the world with what you know, for knowledge alone is a powerful master." Alaric glanced back, meeting the guardian's gaze one final time, understanding that he was leaving behind more than just a memory. He was leaving a piece of himself in this shadowed place, a bond that would forever link him to the island's timeless mysteries. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind filled with secrets, Alaric stepped away from the clearing, leaving the guardian and the veiled whispers behind. But the knowledge, dark and haunting, would remain within him, a silent companion on the journey back to his kingdom, and the life that awaited him beyond the island's shadow. As dawn's ball light began to creep through the thinning mist, Alaric retraced his steps along the hidden path, his heart a strange mix of grief and revelation. The loss of his mother's face haunted him, leaving an emptiness where once there had been warmth and light. Though he strained to recall her image, it eluded him, replaced by a hollow ache that whispered of his sacrifice. And yet, the forbidden knowledge now coursing through him filled that void with a strange and terrible purpose, like a flame that could neither be extinguished nor ignored. The journey back to the mainland seemed longer than he remembered. The path was still, with no sound but the soft padding of his boots against the damp ground, and the weight of the island's secrets pressed upon him, sinking deeper into his soul with every step. His vision felt sharper, attuned to the subtle movements in the mist, as if he could glimpse shadows from another world flickering just beyond sight. The Guardian's words echoed in his mind. Wisdom carries its own burdens. By the time he reached the shore, dawn had fully broken, casting a golden light over the sea, yet he felt no comfort in its warmth. He turned back, his gaze sweeping over the island's distant silhouette, a shadow against the morning sky. The island was quiet now, silent and unmoved, as though it had already forgotten him and the bargain he had struck. Only the faint hum of ancient power, barely perceptible, lingered in his mind. A presence that he knew would remain with him always. As he rode back to his kingdom, he felt the weight of his sacrifice in small, unexpected ways. Familiar sights along the road looked different, colder, as if tinged by a veil he couldn't lift. The landscape, once vibrant, seemed muted, and he realized with a quiet shock that he could no longer remember the details of his mother's laughter or the exact shade of her eyes. He only knew the sensation of her absence, a space left unfilled, a price he had willingly paid. And for what? Knowledge, yes, but knowledge that felt as much a curse as it did a gift. By the time he reached the castle gates, he felt like a stranger in his own skin. The guards greeted him with surprise, their faces lighting with relief and confusion. But he could barely manage a nod. Word of his return traveled swiftly, and he soon found himself in the presence of the king, who looked upon his son with an unspoken question lingering in his gaze. "Alaric," his father began, his voice heavy with relief and caution. You went to the island, didn't you?" Alaric nodded, unable to meet his father's gaze directly. How could he explain what he had seen, what he had sacrificed? The secrets of the island lay within him now, coiling like smoke, vast and incomprehensible, their weight pressing down upon his soul. "There is a knowledge in me now," he said softly, his voice carrying an edge of sorrow. "It changes things, how I see, how I feel, and it demands a cost, one I cannot reverse." The king's eyes softened, as though understanding more than he could say. He rested a hand on Alaric's shoulder, his grip firm and steady. "You were always meant to know things beyond the ordinary, Alaric. But remember that the greatest wisdom is often in the restraint of such knowledge." Alaric nodded, feeling the weight of his father's words, the silent warning they carried. Wisdom, he now understood, was not in possessing knowledge, but in knowing how to carry it, how to let it live within him without consuming him whole. He glanced around the room, his eyes catching familiar objects. The old tapestry that hung by the throne, the flickering light from a brazier, the solemn faces of the councilmen who watched him with silent reverence. Everything appeared different now, distant, as though he were looking through a mist of his own making. Days passed, and Alaric returned to his duties, moving through the motions of royal life with a strange sense of detachment. He attended council meetings, oversaw the training of soldiers, and walked among his people. But he felt separate, as though a wall of shadows divided him from those around him. The knowledge of the island lived within him, alive and restless, revealing glimpses of truths too profound to share. Sometimes, in the still of the night, he could feel the memory of his sacrifice, a hollow ache where his mother's face should have been, and he would lie awake, his soul heavy with both wisdom and longing. The island's truth was no mere story. It was a responsibility, a burden that required silence. He understood now why it had been forbidden, why none who returned from it ever spoke of its secrets. To hold such knowledge was to bear a silent vigil, a weight that one could neither explain nor relinquish. In time, the people of the kingdom noticed a change in their prince. He was wiser, they said, quieter, as though he had glimpsed something beyond this world and carried its mysteries within him. They spoke of him in hushed tones, of the night he had vanished, of the island and its curse. Rumors spread that he had made a pact with spirits, that he held knowledge too powerful for mortals. And though Alaric said nothing to confirm or deny these whispers, he felt their truth resonate in the quiet depths of his soul. And so, Prince Alaric became a legend himself, a man touched by the forbidden, a figure both feared and revered, who walked with the wisdom of the ages within him. He carried the price of that knowledge, both the loss and the light of it, into the years that followed, bearing it as silently as the stones of the island bore their ancient symbols. In the still moments, when the wind whispered through the castle halls and the light faded to twilight, Alaric would sometimes look toward the distant sea, where the island lay hidden beneath its veil of mist, its secrets forever bound to him. He knew he would never return, but the island's memory lived on within him, a quiet reminder of the cost of forbidden wisdom, of the knowledge that shapes and changes all who dare to seek it.